Hey everybody, this is Cal again, and this is Ramblings About Something Close to Nothing. This is the eighth episode, and again, we're doing it via Skype or something close to Skype. And I got Milton Streeter, who was part of the first Ramblings About Something Close to Nothing we did at Onicon. And how many years ago was that now, Milton?
Um, Three, I think.
Three. That was quite an interesting, uh, fun panel that we did.
Yeah, it was. I quite liked it.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd be able to wing my way through all that, but I had a chance to talk about something I was passionate about, and I suppose that helped.
What got you into anime? I guess this is for the people who don't know you. So what got you into anime, and how did you stumble into Hawaii, and how did you end up becoming the president of JASH?
Oh wow, that's almost a biography.
We got time.
Well, I stumbled I stumbled into anime. I would say around '79.
Oh, back when they had dinosaurs. Yeah.
Yeah, back when they had dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And when Buck Rogers was still on television and all that sort of thing. Anyway, a couple of years before that, there had been a certain translated anime on the air, which we knew as Star Blazers. Everyone else, of course, knows it by its original name, Space Cruiser Yamato.
Right.
And I was very taken about it. In the city where I'm from, it ran 5 days a week for 5 straight years. It appears the audience never got tired of it. And I was fascinated by all of it. Never mind the outrageous premise of a 20th century battleship being refitted for space three centuries later.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing that got me was the character development and the dramatization. There was one early episode where everyone stopped to say their last goodbyes to Earth before leaving the solar system. And in the entire episode, not a single shot was fired. And I'm starting to think this is not the usual cartoons that I was used to.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in the 70s, things were pretty lean. All there was old Hanna-Barbera stuff and some stuff from Filmation, which was more adult, but not as adult as that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was interested in that. And while I was in Virginia, I was still in the service then and stationed in Virginia, I encountered news of an organization called the CFO, Cartoon Fantasy Organization.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't take long for me to find out that there was a branch in New York. So one weekend when I went home, I went up to New York and tracked them down.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a revelation for me. I had never seen raw anime before, and I saw several which stuck with me to this day. My all-time favorite was Galaxy Express 39.
You just like the girls.
Well, you never forget your first anime girl, ever. And she was mine. And there was also Captain Harlock and Cyborg 009. And to make things even better, New York Television was running a couple of those shows on Saturdays. So I actually stayed up there long enough to see them before going home.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out later on that there was a branch of the CFO in Washington, which made things a little easier for me. And I joined there. That was how I got involved with anime.
Mm-hmm.
And about the same time, I was up for transfer, and I hadn't decided on where I wanted to be transferred to, so I put in a request, and I said, why not? I'll ask for Japan, get a chance to see some of this stuff up close. and I got it. I didn't get exactly where I wanted to. They sent me to Okinawa, but it was still Japan, and I wound up spending a year there, and I wound up spending a total of 5 years in Japan, and I blame anime. Actually, I blame myself. I blame anime for that because that's what kept me there, among other things. But that's a whole other story in itself. A few years later, it was time for me to transfer again, and since they told me I couldn't stay in Japan any longer, but had to go back to the States, I requested Hawaii, which turned out to be a good move, because after 5 years in Hawaii, if they'd sent me to some place like South Carolina or Virginia, it would have been too much of a culture shock. But Hawaii turned out to be a whole lot better. And I remained with anime after that. I encountered a fellow of our acquaintance. We know him, Ed Klaproth, and he ran the old Space Castle store. And I found out then about JASH, Japanese Animation Society of Hawaii. It was a very small group then, and they met inside Space Castle after we closed it down on Sundays. So we would sit there and watch anime and talk about this and discuss a few toys and whatever stuff we could get on VHS, which was very little at the time. And I joined that, and I remained with that for the rest of the time I was in Hawaii. Then I had to go to San Diego for a couple of years, so obviously I couldn't do anything then.
And that was before San Diego Comic-Con, right?
It was just before San Diego Comic-Con. I missed the 92 one, but I did make it to 93, AX 93. And I still remember that one with great fondness. In early 93, I returned to Hawaii and found out that JASH was still around. I was undergoing some personal difficulties at the time, and I needed something to take my mind off of it. Getting back into JASH helped me ease my way back into civilian society, as I was no longer in the service. And as it turned out, it was just the thing I needed. It gave me something to concentrate on. I got the chance to talk to people, and I had the advantage of having spent the last several years before that in Japan. I was at ground zero for all of this stuff. So for a while, at least, I was kind of an expert by default. When there was a change in the leadership, when the president decided to move on to other things, there was a question as to who would take over after that. I volunteered partially because I really didn't have much else of anything to do at the time, and everybody seemed to agree with me, so I wound up being the president, and I kept that for 9 years until we actually shut down the organization. It proved to be a very interesting time and a very entertaining one. So that's the short form. A longer one would take a book.
And then you handed things off to me.
Yeah, as it turned out, because by that time you were involved, and you had all the qualities that I figured everybody saw in me when I was in charge of JASH. You had the knowledge, you had the credentials, and perhaps most important, you had the enthusiasm. So
yeah, I was crazy,
I figured,
like you.
Well, so was I back then. So, you have to be necessarily something of a fanatic to do this sort of thing, because you remember how it was even 20 years ago. People say, you watch Japanese cartoons, and do you really understand that? Now it's easier for you because you're of Japanese descent.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody can look at me and know that I am not Japanese in any way, shape, or form. So
it was a funny story about when I went to my first JASH meeting, and that was when you guys was down at on Pool Holly Road.
Ah, yes, okay.
That was my first one. Then I went there, and because I found it on, there was this thing called the Complete Guide to Anime that was published by Viz back in the day, way back in the day, and it was listed.
Yeah, way back in the day.
Yeah, JASH was listed. So I made a call, and I got a hold of the late Ross Yoshino, because the phone number went to his phone, and went down there, and he said, looked at it, and he said, oh yeah, the president, Milton Streeter, da 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 da. I'm like, oh, cool, okay. And I was expecting to see a young Howley guy. I wasn't expecting to meet Hokkaido.
Now, there's a very interesting side story about something very similar, but that was an outgrowth of our appearance at the Japanese Cultural Center.
Right. I like this story.
Yeah. Do you think our listeners would be interested in that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It just so happened that the Japanese Cultural Center was right around the corner from where I was living at the time, which really made things convenient.
Mm-hmm.
And since it was, a cultural festival, we decided to put in our appearance because, after all, anime is part of Japanese popular culture. So
mm-hmm.
I showed up, and of course, a considerable number of the members showed up. And I wound up putting on a speech that was supposed to have run an hour and came damn near an hour and a half, because either I couldn't stop talking or because everybody actually seemed interested in what I had to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I was told afterwards that I was invited to give another talk by one of the local civics groups,
mm-hmm.
and it was composed entirely of people who were of I don't know the region, but they were all their ancestors were all from Nagasaki, the
mm-hmm.
Nagasaki region. So a couple of weeks later, I went there, and I was surrounded by 20 people, all of them the youngest of whom was approximately my age, and the oldest was perhaps 70 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I started off right at the beginning with the obvious question. Said, I know what you're thinking. What am I, a Popolo, doing explaining Japanese popular culture to an audience of Japanese descended people? So I told them how I got involved with it, and
mm-hmm.
then I gave them my lecture, as it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they seemed most impressed with was, DVDs were just starting to catch on then.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, one of the best things about DVD is that you can put both the original language and you can sub it. You can put subtitles on it,
mm-hmm.
or dub it in the local language, whatever that language happens to be.
Right.
And so I showed several of them a clip from, what was it? Spirited Away.
Oh.
And I ran it in the original Japanese, and then I ran it with the English dub, and I let them know. I said, this is a great way to communicate with your children or your grandchildren, because you can hear it in the language you're used to, but your grandchildren, if they're better with English, they can follow along with it just as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this makes it enjoyable to a very large age range, and a very large cultural one too. They seem to like it very much. Their leader asked me afterwards if I was actually from Nagasaki, and I told him no. The only connection I ever had with the city was that I got a chance to visit it once.
Mhm.
But he was very enthusiastic about the presentation I gave. He actually said I should be considered for membership, but I politely declined because my Japanese is next to non-existent. I didn't think I could carry myself very well. But it was but it was an interesting story.
Right. But I guess afterwards, after all of that, we ended up we started running the Oahu Anime Explorer. You know, and a lot of it was all of us who were part of JASH. And you know, we got some new members and you know, got some real interesting people after that.
Hmm.
And then I kind of corralled you into helping me with a convention at a very horrific place called Aloha Tower. May God have mercy on our souls for being there. But how did you like your Macross Museum?
Speaking for myself, but of course I'm biased.
Yeah.
I think that both Steve and I did a very good job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who was responsible for the uniforms, but they were very good at attracting people to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when they came in and saw all our Macross memorabilia, some of them were astounded.
The uniforms were from Linley Sato.
Ah, okay.
One of the World Costume people.
See, that was something I didn't know then, and I didn't know until just now. I thought the costumes were very good. They might have been nicer if someone had modeled them, but being mannequins was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Steve had his stuff out there. I had my stuff out there, and between the two of us, we had a pretty impressive collection.
Mm-hmm.
I spent practically the whole convention in there because there were only the two of us, and somebody had to keep an eye on the place.
Right.
But as for the rest, I spent some of my time, of course, in the game room when I could. But the only other thing I remember is Aloha Tower itself, because I was there long enough to remember back in the days when it was busy, and although we put up a good show, it was a shame to see it like that. That really bothered me.
Yeah, it just didn't live up to it. It doesn't live up to its past glory, you know?
No, and it's still one of the most recognizable land points in the city too, which makes it even more unfair somehow.
But someone asked you one time, and I think, and you gave that person an answer, and they asked you one time, I think it was at a JASH meeting, is there any anime you don't like? And you had an answer, and I was like, what's wrong with that?
It has taken me 30 years and more, but, you know, and like everybody else, I have my favorites. There's some that I just don't watch because I'm just not interested. I don't think I've ever sat through more than 2 episodes of Dragon Ball Z, for example.
Right.
But I've only ever found one anime that I didn't like, and I wanted to like it. I watched the whole thing in the expectation that something was going to happen, but somehow it never did. That was Ergo Proxy.
I know you told that girl that you didn't like Urotsuki Doji, and I'm like, what's wrong with that?
I didn't like what?
Urotsuki Doji.
Oh, yes. No, I didn't particularly like that. I didn't particularly like that either.
Tentacles aren't the thing.
If I had seen it subtitled and been able to follow the plot, maybe I would have changed my mind. And then again, considering the subject matter, maybe I wouldn't have.
What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. But anyway, like you said, everyone has their, has their thing, right?
Yep. And I don't decry anyone else for theirs, but there's just some places where I will not tread.
Right.
And that happened to be one of them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I gotta admit, though, it was a good answer. for an awful, it was not a question I had expected to be asked,
mm-hmm.
and that was the first thing that came to mind because, well, I had a gut reaction to it.
Did you ever cosplay anything?
Talk with anything? In what way?
Because all the times that I know we've gone and done things, you've never came out with us to cosplay.
No, I have never cosplayed, and although I have given it some thought, it's never gone beyond that, because, well, first of all, I consider myself a bit old for that sort of thing, and second, because any of the costumes that I would have liked to wear, probably only a handful of people would recognize them, and they'd be mostly old dogs like me.
Yeah, not necessarily.
I still think about it, though. There's also the fact that I couldn't afford a costume.
Okay, we're going to have to make you one. I don't know what we're going to make you, but we'll make you something.
Well, see, that is also a question, because there's only a handful of black characters in anime, and I don't fit the parameters of most of them. If you were to mention one now, most people would think of, say, Dutch from Black Lagoon.
Yep.
And I don't have a build anywhere near his.
Well, that's what foam padding's for.
Yeah, but he's also a tall fellow, and I'm not that tall either. I'm a hair under 6 feet. That's not quite the same.
You're taller than all of us.
Dutch comes up about 6'5" or so.
Yeah, well, you're still taller than all of us.
That may be, but
or you can be like me and dress up as Harlock and be half as tall and twice as wide.
Well, I haven't entirely discarded the idea, even though I should know better. The whole point of cosplay is having fun, and I still entertain the hope that I might actually be able to do a cosplay one of these days. Probably, perhaps next year after I come into some extra money.
What is the best, most fun thing you ever did with the anime people here in Hawaii? Or memorable, how's that? Other than karaoke nights.
I can think of two. The first was our appearance at the Japanese Cultural Center.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that, and I'm glad a lot of the people who were there enjoyed the talk I gave as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt it was necessary to raise our profile, have the people more aware that we existed and what we were about.
Mm-hmm.
That was a major opportunity for us to do so, and it was a success.
Mm-hmm.
But quite apart from all that, it brought back some personal memories from me from my days in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a mix of both. The other was an interview with myself and a couple of other members
mm-hmm.
at the old Borders store, and we were interviewed by a reporter from the Star Bulletin, and they were asking us about the Final Fantasy movie,
mm-hmm.
which had just been released. We liked to boast the fact that we actually had a local link to it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
What's the company? Yeah. Square Enix
mm-hmm.
had taken several floors of a high-rise downtown to produce the movie, because it was all CGI, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened that a former member of ours,
Roy Sato.
Roy Sato, right, was a local boy.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually working with Square Enix at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave us a hometown hero feeling to it.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked us what our expectations were, what we thought of the movie, and so forth and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that turned out quite well, too.
Mm-hmm.
The movie, of course, didn't do so well, but that wasn't Roy's fault. I placed the blame squarely on Square,
Mm-hmm.
because they never told us what they were planning. They never told the audience, either here or in Japan, what they were planning to do or how they were planning to do it. They kept the secret like it was, something in the vaults at Fort Knox.
Mm-hmm.
And that secretive manner, I think, was largely responsible
Mm-hmm.
for the reason that the movie was not a success.
Right.
And he did have to resign afterwards.
Uh-huh.
So Square Enix hasn't made that mistake since then.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't made another movie either. Well, in a way they have. There was Advent Children, but they haven't done anything like that again.
Right.
And it's been 15 years or more now. They should
Right.
try, particularly since, as everybody knows, they're working on a reboot of Final Fantasy VII, which
Mm-hmm.
is still their best-selling game. And it
Mm-hmm.
was the one that firmly established them in the United States. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
it opened up the world of Japanese RPGs
Mm-hmm.
in North America.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps they should try again. But we were considered, because we had a visible profile. We were kind of considered experts on not just anime, but stuff on the peripherals too, such as Final Fantasy games and such. So that was our biggest moment in the spotlight, I think. And that's the other memorable thing that I remember.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember, like there used to be that movie, Weekend at Bernie's? For us, it was Weekends at Todd's.
Yes. Todd Perkins was like a shot of Red Bull for us.
Yep. He had he was at that time subtitling all the cool videos, all the cool anime. And they're still kind of doing it now in Kansas, but nowadays there's so much stuff available so quickly.
Yes. And I hold him directly responsible for two particularly memorable series,
mm-hmm.
which I might not have known about at all, let alone
Legend of the Galactic
later.
Cows?
Yeah, Legend of the Galactic Heroes. That was the first one. That's the one that I've been a sci-fi guy
right.
for all of my life, and that was exactly the sort of thing that I needed.
Right.
I still remember when I first found out about it, when I said 100. It's 110 episodes, And when I finally sat down and finished the last one, I said, "Why are there only 110 episodes?"
Yeah, I referred we first referred to it as Legend of the Galactic Cows. It's because when the Japanese made their first covers for the videos and stuff, it said Herden Saga.
Yes, instead of Helden Saga.
Right.
When they finally transferred it, they didn't catch it until the second season.
Right.
So, and I understand in the DVD re-released, it's not there at all. They have it straight all the way through.
Uh-huh.
So I guess that makes those vintage 81 something of a collector's item now.
And Todd has them all.
And the other one was Initial D.
Ah, yes.
Now,
something dear to my heart.
Yeah. I'm no driver, and even if I were, I wouldn't attempt to do some of the things that are that I've seen in that show.
We did.
But it had everything. It had an interesting and unconventional hero. It had a kick-ass soundtrack,
Mm-hmm.
and it had just enough drama to link all the racing parts together, which is what a lot of folks were tuned in for anyway.
Mm-hmm. There's a guy that I know. We told him, here's I gave him all the DVDs that I had.
Uh-huh.
So here, go watch this, but make sure you have time because you're not going to want to stop. Nah. So he went home, and I guess he spent the entire Sunday night and didn't sleep because he kept on watching it all the way to the end. I was like, well, we told you so.
Yeah, that's an otaku problem, Sleep for one more episode.
Yep.
And of course we all know what the answer usually is.
Yep. One more episode.
One more episode.
And then it's like, oh well, I'm getting kind of tired. I'll drink a Red Bull or a Monster or a Rockstar. And then like, okay, now I can't sleep. Okay, we'll watch 4 more episodes.
Mhm. There's always something.
So,
but
were you here when I helped Todd build his Fujiwara Tofu Shop replica car?
I was here the whole time Todd was. I must have been.
Yeah. And then we built
I must have been, but I didn't know all the details about it.
Right. And he got his rims and everything, And that's pretty cool.
And of course that the car itself was nothing extraordinary to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Unless of course you were part of the club.
Yeah.
So, as a matter of fact, I picked up about that same time. I picked up a game for the old Dreamcast,
mm-hmm.
and although it didn't have any direct ties to the series, there was an 8.6 as one of the cars you could race in it. Tokyo Street Racer it was.
Right.
And I would pick it just because I still have the game, still have my Dreamcast as a matter of fact. And every once in a while I drag it out, but of course I'm not the arcade warrior I used to be. I crash a bit more often than I did 10 years ago.
What else was it? Oh, this is going to be a funny subject. Kubo and the 2 strings.
Ah.
And I told you to go watch it.
Yes, and I'm glad I took your advice. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yep. What is the best scene in the movie to you?
That's a hard one.
Which is the scene that wanted to make you cry the most? How's that one?
Actually, I try to avoid those moments. But I'll tell you the scene that I thought was the most thrilling. That was the fight on the boat. One of those 2 harpy sisters there.
Mm-hmm.
I know they took their cues from East Asian folklore,
mm-hmm.
and I know just enough about it to know that women in Japanese folklore are downright terrifying. And
ask any otaku, they will tell you women, or ask any male otaku, and they will always tell you that women in general are very terrifying.
Yeah, but a lot of the time they're partially to blame for that.
Well, yeah.
But those were some very thrilling moments there, because I knew he was going to survive. Obviously, he had to,
mm-hmm.
but didn't know how close he was going to come. And she, just by being there, made it all the more terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
That was what I considered a high water mark in the film. But the greatest one was when the Moon King finally revealed himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because he looked like He looked like everybody's favorite old grandfather.
I don't know. To me, when I first looked at him, I'm like, oh, this is what Elvis is going to look like when he's old. Doesn't he kind of look like Elvis?
Kinda, yeah.
That's
He
only my
like
thought, though.
like that, or more like a retired scholar, perhaps. You know,
Well, the Moon
somebody.
King would be like a retired scholar. He's been around since the beginning of time, probably.
Mm. But when he dropped the facade,
Hmm.
and there was one moment, yeah, that I kind of got a little misty-eyed, and that was at the very end.
That was a very powerful scene, even though there was no action.
Now, he was the only moving thing in it, and he didn't move around a great deal.
Hmm. But it was just that dialogue was just so, you know.
Right. And after all these years of anime, the animators, and I'm sure it's part of Japanese culture too. It's that expressing emotions with nothing more than the slightest nod of the head or something like that.
That's good acting, though, you know.
Yeah, there are rough equivalents to that in Western cinema, but not to the level I've seen in Japanese movies.
Hmm.
And the fact that this was not a Japanese-made movie made it all the more remarkable. You could tell the producer and the animators and the artist had really done their homework.
Hmm.
I'm still surprised that Warner didn't give it more publicity. It deserved it, particularly since the studio itself already has a string of pretty successful ones to its credit.
Hmm.
I didn't realize it before, but they made one several years ago that I also thoroughly enjoyed, Coraline.
Hmm.
So I think they should have emphasized it more.
There's a American movie that, you know, like you were talking about how there's hardly any action, but it's very critical part of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably already knowing what movie I'm going to refer to.
Yeah, but do it anyway.
It's the Indianapolis speech from Jaws, right? Where Quint is just sitting there talking, and it's just that small, the way Robert Shaw talks, the way he takes his cap off, flips it onto the table, he, taps his finger on the table. That's all the small things that makes a great scene.
Mhm.
And I wish I could act like that.
I have a soft spot in my heart for Robert Shaw anyway.
The Sting?
No, not for The Sting. For From Russia with Love. He was the Soviet assassin, Red Grant.
Mhm.
But also, way back when I was a kid, there was a TV show on called The Buccaneers, and he had the leading role. He was a reformed pirate himself, named what was his name? Dan Tempest, and it ran. Well, I know how long it ran. It ran 39 episodes because about 10 years ago, the collection came out on DVD, and I bought it. And it was just as good then as it was when I was 11 years old.
Right.
But I thought it was... he was very good at playing characters like that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyone who knows the story of the Indianapolis, what happened to her crew, it was all the more striking because he did describe things the way he did.
Mm-hmm.
No hysterics, no wildly waving of his arms or anything like that. It was almost as if he were reading it off a sheet of paper, but you could tell from his face exactly what was going on because he was describing what he saw.
Right.
And that's what makes the performance stick.
Mm-hmm. Didn't see the first
Yeah,
shark for half an hour. Tiger, 13 photo. You know how you know that when you're in water, Chief? You can tell by looking from the dorsal to the tail. Such a classic. I mean, that's one of the best monologues I think I've ever seen.
it was very, very good.
Best monologues in anime.
Oh,
I know there's a lot.
I couldn't begin to think of any. Although one stands out, it was a monologue because there was somebody actually there to hear him, even though the other party didn't talk. And mind you, I have never heard it in the original Japanese. But the English translation of it, I think, was incredibly accurate, and the American voice actor who did it, I think, carried it off. And that was from Star Blazer Season 2, The War with the Comet Empire. Towards the end, Dessler, or Deathlock, to use his English name,
right?
He was he was there, and Yuki Nova was there,
right?
And Wildstar Kodai was lying on the deck, gravely wounded, and she had the pistol pointed right at his heart. She could have fired it, and he just began he simply started his monologue. And he was very philosophical about it. I remember that particular line: "War does not give us does not allow us to be our better selves," which I thought was a very classy line. And even better, in the end, he gave the pistol back to her and simply said, "I hope we'll meet again," and turned his back to her and walked away. He knew that she could have shot him, and yet he knew that she wouldn't. You don't generally see villains with that much class.
Yeah, you don't.
And like I said, I think the American version of that was very accurate, given what I've heard of the Japanese version. The exact words probably were the same, but the spirit of it was there. And that was one of the most memorable scenes in anime to me to this day, and I didn't know half as much about anime then as I do now, and that still stands out.
I think you've forgotten more about anime than 90% of the people have ever known.
I probably wouldn't go that far, but it's possible. All I know is that while I was stationed in Japan, once I got into anime, there was no getting away from it. It was everywhere I looked, even when I wasn't looking for it.
Right.
I remember one afternoon in Yokosuka, I was just ambling on down the street, not thinking of anything, and I saw something flash on the ground. I thought it was a coin or something. I bent to pick it up, and it was a charm figure of a Gundam. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't expect to find anything like that, but there it was.
It found you.
And of course, there was my Kodak moment. I wish to God somebody had a camera for that. I went to an anime store in Yokosuka. I had never been to that particular store, and I wanted to do so just to check the place out, because it was halfway between Tokyo and Yokosuka, which meant I didn't have to go all the way into the city in order to get my anime fix.
Right.
So I went there, and it was a Saturday, early Saturday afternoon, and I was most of the people who were in there were something like, roughly half my age and maybe half my size. But I picked up, a book here, a magazine there, some other goods, and I turned around and I came face to face with this kid. He was probably 10 years old, and he looked at me wide-eyed and open-mouthed. Not so much because of who or what I was, but because of my clothing. I was wearing a Gundam T-shirt. He was wearing a Mickey Mouse T-shirt. I wish somebody had a camera.
Your last trip to Japan, I introduced you to somebody. Glenn Carty.
Oh, yes. Your Padawan.
Not my Padawan, but my good friend. I mean, you know. And he has a wonderful family. They're all very, very nice people.
Yes, they are.
You know, and that was an interesting trip to Japan.
It was indeed. How did you ever meet anyway?
I met him at Anime Expo, where he was a vendor.
Oh, right. He mentioned that he'd been a vendor, but I didn't know at which events he'd gone to.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I introduced you to in Japan was a Suica card.
Ah, yes. That is one I will remember fondly.
I tell you, here, I'll get you a card and tell me what you think. One of the most wonderful things you could ever have on a trip to Japan.
Absolutely. If nothing else, you could save yourself a small fortune. You'll save yourself a significant amount of time by not fishing around for money in your pocket.
Right.
Just scan that card and keep on moving.
And then it'll tell you when you run out of money on your card because it's going, and won't let you through the gate.
Right. And you actually do wind up saving money for it, even though it sounds like an enormous outlay when you first get the card.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of the most useful things I've ever used in the city. I shall definitely be buying one for myself the next time I go.
When are you going?
I hope next spring.
So you're going to join Ethan, Key, and myself?
If the timing is right, yes.
Okay, I will let you know. Yeah, so I guess we've rambled on for almost an hour. I mean, we've had ramblings that's gone over like hour and a half, hour 40. But I think we have a lot more stories to tell. So maybe we can tell those stories again later.
I'm all up for that. It's been nice to reminisce with somebody who remembers those days.
Yep. We got to talk more about your other trips to Japan next time.
And a couple of other things as well, but they would best be represented in pictures, and I am probably going to need your help to work on those.
Yeah.
Next time I get over to Honolulu, we can talk that out.
Mhm. Okay. Anyway, that's the end of this episode. But we'll see how it goes. We'll do another one. Anyway, say bye to everybody.
Good night, everyone.
See ya.